Hello everybody and welcome to the DenziBlitz. I'm Mike from Electric City Sentai DenziCaster, and this week it is part 7 of our 10-part look at Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger. Part 7, I'm on the back part of the box now for the episode count, which means this week we are looking at Reborn, the Ultimate God, Geki, Kill Your Tears, Teach Me, the Jewel of Bravery, Stay Alive, Barai, and Ninja Warrior Boy. That's what we're looking at this week here on the show. A couple of quick things that we always get out of the way at the top of the show. Of course, we are using the Shout Factory DVD release of Zyuranger. Came out just a couple years ago. We very much recommend that you go out and pick this one up. If you're a fan of Power Rangers, if you're a fan of Tokusatsu, Super Sentai, you owe it to yourself, and keep in mind that this kind of stuff doesn't happen very often on our side of the Pacific here in the U.S. So definitely pick this up if you want to see more. They've done 4 seasons so far, but it's only 4 out of 40. Keep that in mind. We could get lots more if people pick it up. And obviously some people have, because we've got 4 of them, and Shout Factory will keep doing them, supposedly, as long as we keep buying them. I, for one, am hoping to one day have Gokaiger sitting on this shelf. But there is that, and of course this is not in any way, shape, form, or fashion sponsored by Shout Factory. They're not paying us. Wish they would, but hey, yeah. And we say that, of course, in loving jest, but I always do put that out there since we are using the Shout Factory release, and we are plugging the Shout Factory product. I always do like to put out there that we are not endorsed by anybody, least of all Shout Factory. So, with all of that said and out of the way, on the DenziBlitz, we don't go through plot in depth. We don't go through a lot of minutia about each individual episode. A lot of times, if you want to see a review of something with a lot of discussion of the plot of specific episodes, episode by episode, check out our regular show, DenziCaster, also here on the ECS network. But here we go through fairly quick, 5 episodes per episode, and sometimes more, occasionally less. It just depends on how many I got to watch that day. And if I take pauses between sentences unusually, my apologies. Got some bad heartburn at the moment, but we're going to power through all this. So, power. Get it? That was not intended. So, these 5 episodes of Zyuranger, we have the wrap-up of the storyline with Great Satan that began on our last batch of episodes. We discussed in episode 6. That is with the episode Reborn, the Ultimate God. One thing to sort of keep in mind is that within the mythology of Zyuranger, within this world, the mecha, the guardian beasts, are deities to these old dinosaur tribes. So you hear that phrase used a good deal, God or deity, throughout the show. So when they say Reborn, the Ultimate God, that is the Ultrazord, if you were a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers fan growing up. Titanus with the Mega Dragon Zord, which would be Dragon Caesar and Daizujin combined. I believe, oh my goodness, they flashed the name up of it briefly. It was Zu something. I think Zuten Daizujin, I think. They don't really use the name of that form very much. And realistically, they don't even use that form of the mecha very much. Now that I think about it, you pretty much only see it with Ultimate Daizujin when it all melds together with Brachion, King Brachion. So that is the conclusion of that storyline. The big takeaway from that whole story arc is essentially now the entire team knows Barai's plight. And that is sort of something that permeates episodes going forward. That is the moment in Mighty Morphin where they realize the green candle is draining Tommy's powers, and the more times he morphs, the fewer power he will have, up until he simply has no power left and can no longer become the Green Ranger. Or in this case, the longer Barai is out of the lapseless room, the less time he has to live. So, certainly a bit more finality to that story arc here in Zyuranger. One thing that I failed to point out in our last batch of discussion, our last episode, when we went through Disc 6, was if you didn't think Bandora had a hard-on for kids and trying to kill them all, this story arc with Great Satan is pretty much proof of that. We discussed the frankly horribly named hardest black magic spell of all time, apparently named for how difficult it is to cast it, which would resurrect Dai Satan, Great Satan. To do that, there is this Tower of Satan. It's the pillar that Totpat and Bookback plant in the ground in an earlier episode. And they have to sacrifice, and I was reminded, obviously, watching the first episode here with Ultimate Daisugen, they have to sacrifice 13 10-year-old kids to this thing. And by sacrifice, we mean they actually become part of the tower. Now think about that for a second. Now they use the phrase, they're in the tower. Well, yes, they are in the tower, as in we can see their faces and their arms poking out, screaming for help. They are physically part of the tower. Eventually, and we are very much now in episodes of this I've never seen, I know that Bandora in the series has a problem with kids. I have not read up on the series much lately. I have in the past. I'm a little fuzzy on the details, which is why I'm not going into what I think I know. I'd rather talk about what I actually know, what I've seen. But I'm looking forward to figuring out exactly why she just absolutely seems to hate all children. She's like the opposite of Gamera. If you've ever seen any of the Gamera movies, the giant flying turtle, Dai's answer to Godzilla, and the friend of all children. Yeah, not so much. But we get the conclusion of that storyline with Great Satan. We are warned that he will be back by our faceless, nameless narrator. And we are now left with everyone knowing that Barai's time on this earth is short. At the end of that episode, we are told he has 15 hours left to his name. By the end of the disc, we're down to 8. So that's your first episode. When we move forward from this point on, we are basically back into a bit of filler territory. Geki Kill Your Tears somewhat serves as an epilogue to the Great Satan story arc, where our monster, Dora Narcissus, who is pretty much what it sounds like, it's a beauty-obsessed monster, presumably can grant life. That is apparently one of Dora Narcissus' powers. And Bandora uses that as a temptation to keep the Zyurangers from destroying the monster, because Geki wants to save his brother. We see Geki very torn, and we see that he will take steps, at least at this point, to try to prolong, if not save, his brother Barai's life. So that's why I say it sort of serves as an epilogue to the Great Satan storyline, because we now know that Barai is going to die in less than a day of real time if he doesn't stay in the lapseless room. And realistically, that's about the only big takeaway from that episode. In fact, if I recall correctly, I just watched this disc, and that episode admittedly did not hold a wealth of my attention. But I don't even think Barai showed up in the episode now that I think about it. Let's see here. Teach Me, the Jewel of Bravery. Another kid-centered episode. That's an ongoing theme with a lot of our filler episodes, but a lot of the episodes of the series in general, is kids play a huge part. Not only does Bandora really hate children, children help the Zyurangers in a lot of instances, and this is one of them, where it's actually a child that saves the day. The monster is a corrupted form of a jewel. There were two twin fairies, well, not twin fairies, but two close friends, fairies, young girls, in ancient times, Sunny and Rainy. Not a lot of imagination here with the names, folks. Guess what they control? And Sunny is stuck in a jewel, because Bandora, about almost 200 million years ago, attacked them to take their power and use it against humanity. Sunny escaped but wound up stuck in her jewel that helped her control the weather, and Rainy was captured and confined to the jewel, is kind of the implication you're given, and corrupted by Bandora, and turned into this Dora monster, which can make it rain for 1,000 days and flood the earth. As we get back into some biblical proportional stuff that they use in the show. Like I said, as far as a thematic motif to the entire show, beyond the ideas of dinosaur and fantasy, they're really going all over the bloody place. I mean, we've seen fairies, and we've seen the space program, and we've seen medieval knights, and we've seen the Wizard of Oz, and let's see, Universal Monsters, and the Hammer horror flicks. We've basically seen a little bit of everything. Even the design of Great Satan might as well be Pinhead's second cousin. So, lots of different, just jumping all over the place with this. Gnomes and fairies, and now in this episode, even more strange things. So, going into Noah's Ark kind of stuff. So, it winds up being a little girl who is in possession of Sunny's jewel that winds up saving the day. And a lot of the episode is also partially focused on Dan, who we know is the warrior of courage. We find that out in the first episode of this, where it's of this disc, where they debut Ultimate Zyuranger, because these 6 Zyurangers all together have to bring forth this transformation, and we have to learn what each of their duties are, which leads to a slight variation of their roll call, where May proclaims herself the warrior of love, Ghosh, Mammoth Ranger, are black, proclaims himself the warrior of knowledge, Boy, yellow, the warrior of courage, Boy is the warrior of hope, Dan, blue, the warrior of courage, and then we have Barai, green, the warrior of power, and we have Geki, red, the warrior of justice. So it is courage that is played off of in this episode, with the girl showing the courage, not just to act, but to face down a Dora monster without the Zyurangers to help her. The only Zyuranger that can help her is Dan, and he does, but one Zyuranger, when the monster's taken down 4 of them, sounds dicey. Then we have Stay Alive Barai. Now, Stay Alive Barai is probably going to go on my essentials list for this as a standalone episode, if for no other reason than it very much is a focus episode on Barai, which you don't really get thus far outside of a lengthy arc. Barai's only 2 major contributions to the series in any way up to this point have been his debut in what I guess we would call the Dragon Ranger arc, and then, or the evil Dragon Ranger arc, and then the Great Satan arc. And that's it. That's his 2 major contributions. The rest of the time, he shows up, he blows on his flute, and Mechagodzilla shows up. That's it. This is actually a focus episode on him, and we delve back into the realm of very loose and broad interpretation of fantasy, because our fantasy element in this episode is Sleeping Beauty, where Lammy does her best impersonation of a Grimm's fairy tale villain, but causes a young lady to prick her finger. Barai, we basically figure out at this point, we now see the dichotomy between Barai and Geki, which you have to figure is going to come to a head, especially if you know the episode titles, because the Japanese do not believe in spoiler-free episode titles. The sort of difference, the dichotomy between them becomes Geki will do anything, as we see in an earlier episode on the disc, as we see in, which one is it here? Geki, Kill Your Tears. He will do anything, including considering the letting a Dora monster not only go loose, but, you know, live but get loose and do its thing, if it can save his brother. Whereas Barai, being confined to this room, if he wants to live and completely cut off from the outside world, to him, that is tantamount to death. He would rather go out and spend his remaining time with people and making a difference, even if it's a matter of hours. So Barai seemingly has resigned himself to, my moments are ticking away, and Geki hasn't. Which is a pretty deep thing when you stop to think about this. Is, as I've often said about tokusatsu hero shows, it's a 20-minute toy commercial aimed at kids. But that's some pretty deep thinking when you stop to look at these two characters. And all around, a pretty cool episode, getting to focus on Barai and getting to see him be the badass that he is. That is one thing that that Zyuranger has done very, very well. And it's the prototype, so you figure it might as well. Zyuranger has consistently treated Barai as special. He is the 6th Ranger, and it is the first time in Sentai history that you have a consistent 6th Ranger. There is one episode of Mask Man, which predates this by several years, that has a character called X1 Mask, who was the prototype Mask Man, and he showed up and had powers for one episode. And you had the Mask Man team as a 6-person team for one episode. This is the first time that we actually have an honest-to-goodness 6th Ranger. Dragon Ranger's credited as the first 6th Ranger. And a trend with the idea of the 6th, especially nowadays, is the 6th Ranger, one, shows up very early and joins the team more often than not very early. If we look at this one, and I'll backtrack here just a little bit in my thing here. Okay, so Barai shows up in episode 17. Now that doesn't seem like it's too inconsistent with what we see today out of a lot of Super Sentai shows, but just throwing this out there, he doesn't actually join the team until episode 22. So he takes his own sweet time about becoming one of the Zyurangers. So it's very different now when you have these characters and they show up and they're Billy Badass for a while. They can do things on their own that the whole team can't, until it's necessary for them to be vulnerable just like everyone else on the team. And then they're just another member in a lot of cases. Barai, you never get that feeling. Every time he's on screen, it is something special. He is either... and when I say Barai, I mean Barai. I don't mean Dragon Ranger, because Dragon Ranger shows up once an episode here and there to save the day and bail our guys out when they need extra robot support. I mean actually the character Barai, out of costume. When he shows up, it's a big deal because there's weight to it. You know he's a dead man walking. And so he is easily my favorite character in the show, and his stories really draw me in. The last episode on the disc, which we're not going to go through a great deal because it's definitely filler, but I have to wonder about this one particular thing. It's Ninja Warrior Boy. So essentially the basic idea of the episode is that Boy is a self-taught ninja. There is a ninja school who have apparently learned the secret to creating the elixir of life, which will grant immortality. So in the back of your head, they never say it, but you can figure Barai is the subplot. Of course, Queen Bandora and her evil minions want to get this. We have a ninja-themed monster. But Boy apparently is a self-taught ninja. Who knew? And we see the rest of the team by the end of the episode in full ninja regalia, ditching their standard civilian costumes. They all have these brown ninja attire, ninja jumpsuits. I don't know the proper term for them, but these ninja suits with color-coded, of course, scarves and trim. And I had to ask myself when I was watching this, because a thing about these shows that you have to understand, Super Sentai will typically, while one is in production, the next one is in pre-production. Zyuranger, by the time this episode aired, and this was episode 34. No, it wasn't. It was episode 35. They screwed up the... I just... Shout Factory, fix this in a reprint if you get a chance, if you do a second printing of this. The episode count for Disc 7 says 31, 30, 32, 33, 34. It's episode 35, folks. By episode 35, Zyuranger was probably set in stone. They probably knew this was what the next show was going to be. Design work was probably already underway. They'd probably already done casting, the writing process, and so on, because the shows literally piggyback one another. The week after Zyuranger episode 50 aired, Zyuranger episode 1 debuted. So, one has to wonder. The series that follows Zyuranger is Kyoryuger, which is a ninja-themed Sentai, and it's the first, like, full-out ninja-themed Sentai. There's the argument that Go Ranger had a ninja theme to it, too, the very first one, but it was more secret agent kind of deal. This felt like the backdoor pilot to Kyoryuger, to be perfectly honest with you. The ninja tricks, almost the sense of humor that went with it, the style it was shot, because I've seen a chunk of Kyoryuger, again, not all of it, but I've seen a chunk of it. Even the music that plays, there's an insert song, which might be one of the best insert songs in the series. Like I said, I hate the opening, I hate the closing, I hate some of the interstitial music, but the insert song here for Boy's big fight, because it's a focus episode for him, his big ninja fight, sounds like it came straight off of the Kyoryuger soundtrack. So if you want an idea of what prototypical Kyoryuger looked like, it's episode 35 of Zyuranger, and it probably was, I promise you. I cannot figure out any other reason that show looks and feels the way it does, that episode. I have to believe that right there was a backdoor pilot for Kyoryuger. I could be wrong, I'm probably wrong, but watch it and you tell me. Make some comments below. We don't get enough of those on this channel. Make some comments below. Tell us what you think if you've seen episode 35 of this and you've seen Kyoryuger. So that brings us to a close on Disc 7 of Zyuranger. That means we've only got 3 installments left, Discs 8, 9, and 10. We're in the home stretch, folks, and this is about the time where what I affectionately call the roller coaster starts. Yeah, especially given the names of some of the episodes for Disc 8. I got a feeling that the filler is about to come to a screeching halt. So, with all that, folks, of course, please do share, like, subscribe, all the things you do here on YouTube. Check us out over on Facebook, facebook.com/DenziCaster. If you'd like to help us out, like I said, we don't have sponsors. If you'd like to help us out, new cameras, lighting, what have you, feel free to jump over to the ECS Network store. It's over at cafepress.com/ECS Network. All the proceeds go to the channel. None of the personalities you see on the channel get paid. We all do this because we love it, but any proceeds do go help to buy equipment and such for the channel. We all have full-time jobs, so we appreciate anything you can do to help us out. And you get to get some sweet shirts and things like that. Mine, I think, are in the mail at this point. So definitely check that out. And, of course, like I always say, and I say it every episode, and I'm going to say it every episode, that we're talking about one of the fine releases that Shout Factory has put out. And if we get one that's by another company, I'll talk about theirs too. Please, if you are a fan of Power Rangers, Super Sentai, Toku in general, pick this up if you haven't. It's $40. You can find it on Amazon and any number of other places. I just say Amazon because that's where I find them most often. But pick it up. It's just like anime was back in the day. We don't buy it, they don't make it. That's business. And who doesn't want DVD quality, professionally translated and subtitled Super Sentai sitting on their shelf forever and ever, amen. So, check it out. You get a chance. Until next time, folks, we are going to be looking at episode 8 of this series, Disc 8 of Zyuranger next time. Until then, I'm Mike. We'll see you on the Blitz.